John Beaufort, Confederate Gold, by John Jennett, Chapter 2, Shadows in the Night. Christy Beaufort had lived with John's military habits for decades. She knew the ritual movements, the way he scanned a room before stepping inside, the double check of locks, the sharp turn of his head at the slightest sound in the night. She knew what on edge looked like in him, and lately he was on edge. At meals, John sat quieter than usual, forking at food without tasting it. His eyes strayed to the window, always drifting toward the barn and the pond beyond. Taylor, his Great Pyrenees, often parked himself at John's side under the table, while Emma, Christy's dog, would watch her master with tilted head, as if sensing her unease. One morning, Christy found his notebook on the kitchen counter. The cover was smudged with dirt, the pages stiff where rain had spattered. Inside were rough sketches of their property, boxy outlines of the barn, the pond circled twice, arrows pointing toward a shaded patch of ground. Along the margin he had scrawled, "Square depression equals marker?" The words looked pressed into the paper, almost carved by the force of his pencil. She closed the book with a chill pressing at her skin. That night she woke to the cool emptiness beside her. The clock on the dresser read 2:13. Both dogs were restless. Taylor's deep woof rumbled low from the hall, while Emma stood by the bedroom door, ears pricked, tail stiff. Christy rose, pulling her robe close. Through the window, she caught the flicker of a flashlight beam across the yard. At first, she thought it must be Stephen sneaking out, but the movement was too steady, too deliberate. This wasn't a teenager testing boundaries. This was John. When he came back an hour later, boots muddy and shoulders squared in that familiar, mission-ready way, Christy didn't press him. "Long night?" she asked, rolling to her side as if half asleep. He paused at the edge of the bed. "Couldn't sleep. Needed air." His voice was calm, but his eyes, lit faintly by the bathroom glow, held a spark she hadn't seen in years. Deployment eyes. Focused, alive, and far from her. The next day, with John off on errands, Christy wandered into the barn. Dust motes spun in the sunlight, cutting through the slats. Emma followed close at her heels, while Taylor had stationed himself outside the door as if on guard. On the back wall, pinned to a board, was a survey map of their land. John had drawn over it in neat, precise strokes, grids, coordinates, circles marking the pond and barn. The map looked more like a battlefield layout than a farmer's plot. Later, rifling through the jacket he'd left by the door, Christy's hand brushed something hard. She drew out a heavy, rusted buckle. A faint star engraving was just visible through the corrosion. Not a toy, not junk. Her breath caught. She slipped it back, heart hammering. But the truth pressed in on her. He was hiding something, and it was eating at him. That evening, the boys gave her more to worry about. Dakota was brimming with excitement. "Mom, Dad's training us like soldiers. We're doing patrols around the yard, like real ones, hand signals and everything." Christy's lips thinned. "Patrols? Out there?" Dakota nodded eagerly. "Yeah, Taylor even comes along. He's the best scout." Stephen rolled his eyes. "It's not awesome, Dakota. It's weird. He's chasing ghosts, Mom. You should talk to him before it gets, I don't know, too far." Christy's appetite vanished. Another night, another empty bed. This time she didn't hesitate. She slipped her robe on and followed the faint glow across the yard. Emma padded silently at her side. Taylor already ahead, tail swaying low. At the pond's edge, John knelt in the dirt, flashlight beam fixed on the shallow depression. His fingers traced the soil, slow and reverent, like he was reading Braille on the earth. His face was tight, haunted. A branch snapped under Christy's foot. In an instant, John spun, flashlight snapping up. His whole body coiled, stance wide, like he was clearing a hostile room. For a heartbeat, she saw the soldier, not her husband. Then recognition washed over his face. "Christy!" "Jesus, you shouldn't sneak up like that." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "I wouldn't have to if you'd tell me what the hell you're doing out here at 2 in the morning." He lowered the light. His voice was soft, deflecting. "It's nothing. Just old land. Old ghosts." She crossed her arms, Emma leaning against her leg, Taylor pacing a few steps behind John like a restless shadow. You're scaring the boys. And you're scaring me. John's jaw worked. His eyes flicked back toward the depression, then returned to her. Finally, he nodded. I'll back off. But the next morning, Christy found fresh dirt under his fingernails. And the buckle sat on the dresser, not hidden this time, but displayed like a challenge or a dare. She stood staring at it, Emma shifting uneasily at her side. John wasn't letting go. He couldn't. Something out there had its hooks in him, and Christy realized with a sick twist in her gut that she might soon have to decide. Support him in this obsession, or protect her sons from the thing pulling their father deeper into the past. The next night, John knelt by the pond, fingers absently combing through the damp grass. The night was cool, the air thick with peepers and the soft lap of water against the bank. Taylor sat at his side, ears pricked, as though listening to something John couldn't hear. He rubbed the soil between thumb and forefinger, dark, loamy, fresh with spring growth. But then a smell threaded through the night that didn't belong, acrid gunpowder, sharp iron, sweat soaked into wool. John froze. His breath misted, though the air wasn't cold enough for it. The frog's chorus faded. In its place came the creak of wagon wheels, faint but growing, as if rolling over stone. His chest tightened. He knew this rhythm. He'd heard it before. Taylor gave a low whine, stepping back, hackles lifting. The dog stared not at John but past him, at something moving unseen in the shadows. John blinked, and the stars overhead shifted, smeared, blurred. The scent of pond water vanished under the stench of mules and men. His palms, pressed to the ground, no longer touched soft grass but churned mud, slick and cold. And there they were. 4 figures, lantern light flickering off gray coats, straining at a wagon that carried a weight too heavy for them. Eli at the reins, jaw set like stone. Jacob muttering as he shoved his shoulder against the wheel. Carter trudging, eyes empty, lips whispering scripture. Tommy slumped in the back, fever burning his cheeks, coughing raggedly into the dark. John didn't step into the vision so much as fall, the present collapsing around him until there was nothing left but 1862, the creak of harness leather, the rasp of labored breath, the unbearable certainty that he was standing inside the moment history had tried to bury. The road west was no road at all, just a ribbon of mud winding between ridges and hollows. The chest rode heavy in their wagon, iron bands groaning with every jolt. The mules strained, flanks lathered, breath steaming in the cold spring mornings. Day after day they crept across Tennessee, averaging little more than a dozen miles. When the wagon bogged in mire, all 4 men threw their shoulders against it, curses and prayers mingling in the same breath. Tommy's cough worsened. By the second week, his fever burned so hot he shook beneath his blanket even in the noon sun. At night, when the campfire flickered low, he whispered for his mother back in Virginia, tears streaking his dirt-caked cheeks. Quiet now, Eli told him, though his own eyes betrayed fear. He kept the boy's musket close at hand, knowing Tommy lacked the strength to lift it anymore. Carter walked beside the wagon most days, muttering scripture in a hoarse monotone. The wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. He never seemed to tire of repeating it. Jacob, restless and grim, rode point with musket ready. Twice he warned them of bluecoats scouting near the ridges, and once they had to pull the wagon off into a cedar thicket, covering the chest with brush while cavalry thundered past the road scarcely 30 yards away. The horses' hooves shook the ground. John felt it in his chest as if he stood among them. They crossed swollen creeks by lantern light, water rising to the wagon's axle, soaking their boots and numbing their legs. Once a wheel splintered on a rock, and it took them half a day to rig a brace from a felled tree. By then, Tommy was nearly unconscious. Still, Eli drove them on. We can't turn back, he said. Richmond's counting that payroll lost to raiders. They'll not look west. Clarksville's our end. And so Clarksville became a word they repeated like a prayer, a promised shore. At last the land softened, the Cumberland Plateau falling away into rolling hills and fertile bottomland. Smoke rose from chimneys in distant farms, though war had hollowed the countryside. One evening, as the sun bled red behind the trees, John saw them crest a ridge. Below, the river shimmered, and beyond it, a scattering of buildings. the outskirts of Clarksville. The men reined in, silent. The chest creaked in the wagon bed, as if reminding them of its weight, its claim. Tommy stirred, his voice a ghost. "We made it?" Eli looked west, his face carved in shadow. "Not yet, boy. We hide here first. Then we live." They lingered on the ridge until nightfall, too exposed to risk the road into town. Instead, Eli steered them south, hugging the tree line. The wagon rattled down through gullies and meadows until they came to a stand of limestone bluffs and cedar groves. The land was quiet, only frogs trilling from a nearby pond. The water gleamed silver in the moonlight. A weathered barn stood farther upslope, half hidden in shadow, its timbers already showing age, though it had likely been raised only a decade past. John's breath caught. He knew this place, the pond, the barn. Even in its younger shape, the land was his land. Jacob climbed down, stretched his back, and spat. "Good as anywhere. Out of sight. Ain't nobody sniffing here." Carter shook his head, staring at the chest. "Ain't about sight. It's about sin. We carry this weight. We'll never be rid of it." Eli ignored him. "Ground's soft by the pond. We dig deep enough. She'll stay hid till we come back for her." Tommy stirred weakly, coughing into his rag. Don't leave me." "You'll rest," Eli told him, voice sharp but not unkind. "We'll finish this, then you rest." They set to work with bayonets and bare hands, carving into the earth by the pond's edge. Mud sucked at their boots, roots tangled their fingers, but slowly the hole took shape, wide, deep, enough to swallow the iron-banded chest whole. John felt every shovel scoop, though no steel touched his own hands. He smelled the churned soil, damp and raw. His heart thundered as if the chest might crash through the veil of years and land at his feet. At last, the four men heaved the chest into the pit. It landed with a dull thud that seemed to echo across time. They covered it quickly, piling mud, stamping it flat. Jacob laid a broken wagon spoke across the ground as a marker. Eli stood back, sweat and dirt streaking his face. "Remember this place? Pond, barn, cedar ridge behind. When the war's done, we come back men of means." Carter muttered again, voice hollow. "Boys killing boys. Gold hid in the mud. Nothing here worth remembering." John tried to move closer, desperate to see the exact spot, the exact alignment of tree and barn. The vision blurred, flickering at the edges. Tommy's coughing grew louder, the boy's voice dissolving into the rush of frogs and crickets. Then silence. John staggered, nearly losing his balance. He was back in the present, standing by the very pond, his boots sinking in the same soft ground. The barn loomed in the distance, weathered but still there. Taylor barked once from the fence line, jolting him further into now. But John's hands trembled. The vision hadn't been dreamlike. It had been precise. The chest wasn't legend, wasn't a ghost story. It was here, on his land, buried beneath his boots. The next evening, the kitchen smelled of rosemary and baked chicken, but Christy kept glancing toward John's empty chair. He'd washed up late, mud still crusted beneath his nails, his hair damp as if he'd dunked his head in the pond. The boys were chattering over each other, forks clinking, reliving their patrol with the giddy fervor only teenagers could muster. Dakota mimed a dive into the brush. Stephen drew a map of the property into the condensation of his water glass. Christy smiled at them, but her eyes kept drifting back to John. He barely touched his plate. He sat hunched, elbows braced, gaze fixed on some middle distance that didn't exist in the kitchen. His lips pressed thin, jaw working as though grinding down words he didn't want to say. "Daddy?" Dakota piped up. "You think we'll find something for real?" John blinked slowly, as though dragging himself back from far away. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Eat your dinner, soldier." His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of tone he used when giving an order. Dakota giggled at being called a soldier, but Christy's stomach tightened. She'd seen that look before, when he came back from deployment, before the nightmares had started easing. The boys carried on, oblivious, but Christy studied her husband. His hand had stilled on the table, fingers tapping a steady unconscious rhythm. Military, repetitive, a soldier's habit he didn't know he was doing. And when she caught him glancing out the window toward the pond, there was a flicker in his eyes, something fierce, almost feverish. Christy gripped her fork harder. Whatever had its hooks in John, it wasn't letting go. The old farmhouse creaked in the night as Christy stirred awake. The other side of the bed was cold. Again. Her stomach tightened. She slipped on her robe, the floorboards groaning under her bare feet. From the window she saw it, the pale flick of a flashlight beam slipping past the pond's edge. Emma padded after her as she eased open the back door, the dog's tail swishing low. Curious. The night smelled of damp earth and hay. She kept her distance, her slippers sinking into the dew-wet grass. John was kneeling by the water, the beam of his light steady on the ground, his head bent low, one hand brushing the soil, deliberate, reverent, like he was tracing a memory only he could see. "John," she said softly. He flinched, flashlight whipping up, blinding her for a moment. His whole body was coiled, tense, like the soldier he used to be. Then he lowered the light and let out a long breath. "Christy, you shouldn't be out here." "Neither should you," she said, stepping closer. "It's the middle of the night." "What are you doing?" His eyes caught the moonlight, wild, fever bright. "You won't believe me." "Try me." He hesitated. She could almost hear the battle in him, whether to clamp down, to keep it locked tight, or let it spill. Finally he spoke, low and urgent. "I've seen them, Christy. 4 men, Confederate soldiers. Eli, Jacob, Carter, Tommy. I know their names, their faces. I saw them on the road ambushing a pay wagon. I saw the chest, iron-bound, heavy, gold. They brought it here, to this land, our land. They buried it." Christy blinked at him, her pulse quickening. "John, I'm not making this up." His voice sharpened, cutting through the night. "It's not just dreams. I've been there. I've smelled the smoke, heard the musket fire. I can tell you which one limped, which one coughed blood. I know where they stopped, how they argued. They chose this place. Right here." He jabbed a finger toward the pond. "The chest is here, Christy, waiting." Emma let out a low whine, as if sensing the tautness in the air. Christy's mouth was dry. She'd seen John haunted before, by real battles, real blood. This was different, and yet terrifyingly familiar. "Do you hear yourself?" she whispered. "You're chasing ghosts." "They're not ghosts," he said fiercely. "They're memories." And they left something behind. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft ripple of the pond. John's chest rose and fell like he'd run a mile. Christy looked at him, her husband, the man who'd come home to her in pieces more than once, and felt a shiver race down her spine. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure whether he'd lost himself to the past or found something in it that was real. When the house had gone quiet again, when John's boots were left by the door and the dogs had settled back at her feet, Christy lay awake staring at the ceiling. He'd told her everything, about the soldiers, the ambush, the chest bound in iron, the way he saw them dragging it across the wilderness and burying it in what was now their land. He spoke with such certainty, such conviction, his voice low and steady but his eyes burning. And she believed he believed it. That was what chilled her most. It wasn't just a hobby, not just old land stirring his curiosity. This was war lodged back inside him, the same steel-edged focus he'd carried into deployments. She remembered how he used to look before missions, the restless nights, the way his body thrummed with a kind of anticipation. She thought she'd left that behind when he retired. Now it was back, and it terrified her. Christy turned on her side, watching his silhouette rise and fall beside her in sleep. Part of her wanted to reach out, shake him awake, demand he stop before he dragged their boys into something dangerous, before he unraveled. But another part felt the pull too. If what he saw was real, if something of history lay hidden in their soil, how could she ignore it? Still, the image of Dakota's shining eyes and Stephen's worried frown haunted her. Dakota already talked like a soldier in training. Stephen had whispered to her after supper, "He's going too far, Mom." Christy pressed her palms together, breathing slow, steady, the way she did in church when she was trying not to cry. She had a choice: confront him, shut this down, protect her boys from their father's obsession, or follow him into it, keep close, and pray she could keep the edge of madness from cutting too deep. Neither choice felt safe, and for the first time in years, she wasn't sure she knew how to save the man she loved. This is the end of Chapter 2. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like this story so you don't miss out on Chapter 3.